The first thing I would like to do is dedicate this conference to two people whose lives were deeply implicated in the subject matter that we're going to devote ourselves to thinking hard about in the days ahead, but who are no longer with us. And one of them is mentioned on the front cover of your booklet, Robert Wistrich. I won't ask you to raise your hands. If you knew Robert, virtually every hand in the room, I'm sure, would go up. I can hardly think of anyone who devoted more years, more thought, more productive scholarship to studying anti-Semitism than Robert Wistrich. A number of us were at his last conference. He was to be a speaker at this conference as well, and unfortunately died during a trip to Rome when he was to address the Italian Parliament on anti-Semitism. We miss him. May his memory be a blessing, and may it bless the work that we're doing at this conference and well beyond the conference as well. The second person I will delay telling you about until the end of my remarks. A couple of weeks ago, as it happens, I was in Berlin to participate in a large conference on anti-Semitism that was held in the German Bundestag. An important gathering. It brought together some 250 people, including large numbers of parliamentarians, government officials, and agency heads from some 35 countries. It was a very high-level meeting. Chancellor Angela Merkel gave the keynote address. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Germany's foreign minister, spoke, as did Norbert Lammert, the president of the Bundestag, and various other German officials. The focus was entirely on present-day anti-Semitism. I was one of three scholars of the subject, inviting to help set the stage for the discussions that were to follow, and to remain on and answer questions that would come up during the course of the proceeding. Anti-Semitism, as we all know, is not monolithic. It has a range of different actors, and it manifests itself in a variety of ways. As I told my listeners in Berlin, in my own view, the two most dynamic and most destructive forms of contemporary hostility to Jews are Muslim anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, and I elaborated on both in some detail. A bit later, during a break, a diplomat from one of the Scandinavian countries came up to me. We chatted, and he said the following: "We all know that what you told us a little bit earlier this morning is true, but we don't talk about it in Europe, at least not in such a direct way as you spoke to us. Given the many challenges that European countries face with their large and growing Muslim populations, to explicitly implicate Muslims in anti-Semitism is to risk bringing on too many problems," this diplomat told me. And so the tendency is to speak of racism in general, or anti-minority prejudice at large, or to link attention to anti-Semitism to attention to Islamophobia. As for anti-Zionism, the other important focus of my own remarks, Europeans, he told me, prefer to think of it as criticism of Israel and not anti-Semitism. Others were less evasive and more willing to see anti-Semitism as a serious problem in its own right. Angela Merkel, who gave the conference's keynote, declared, and I quote her, that anti-Semitism is alive today, and we must never accept it. She further noted, and again I quote her words, that hatred against Jews and hatred against Israel often come together in an unlikely alliance. And further, she said, criticism of Israel can be used as a pretext for hatred of Jews, all of that from none other than the head of Germany. That was significant. Foreign Minister Steinmeier acknowledged, and I quote him, that around 20% of Germans have latent anti-Semitic attitudes, and he was not talking about new immigrants to Germany, but people in the mainstream German population. And he admitted, his words, that anti-Semitism is on the rise. Frans Timmermans, a former foreign minister of the Netherlands and now an important official in the EU, concurred, calling anti-Semitism, and I quote Timmermans, Europe's most pernicious disease, and he warned, his words again, it is happening again. All of us in this room pay a lot of attention to what is happening again. That's why we're here. And we know it happens both at the street level through attacks on individual Jews, synagogues, Jewish schools, and other institutions, Jewish cemeteries, and Holocaust memorials. And we know as well that it's been happening on the ideological and political levels through an animus that calls itself Anti-Zionism, but that often has nothing to do with Zionism as such, and instead seeks to criminalize and delegitimize the state of Israel. Anti-Zionism is often a camouflage term. As Stephen Harper, the former Canadian Prime Minister, recognized when he called anti-Zionism, I quote him, the face of the new anti-Semitism. It targets the Jewish people by targeting Israel, and it attempts to make the old bigotry acceptable for a new generation. All of those Harper's words. No one has spoken out against such bigotry more repeatedly than he, or more forcefully than Manuel Valls, the French Prime Minister, who has denounced anti-Zionism as what he called an invitation to anti-Semitism. Pope Francis, speaking this past October, was equally emphatic, I quote the Pope, to attack Jews is anti-Semitism, but an outright attack on the state of Israel is also anti-Semitism. Despite such denunciations by prominent world figures, anti-Zionism not only persists, but it now has global reach, and according to our late friend and eminent scholar Robert Wistrich, I quote him, has become the most dangerous and effective form of anti-Semitism in our time. Underwritten by an ideology that aims at the elimination of Israel, and sometimes accompanied by a radical vision of a world liberated from the Jews, it is what Robert called a totalist form of anti-Semitism, attracting supporters among people on the political left, the political right, and those with no political affiliation, as well as among large numbers of Muslims. It's a potent force, and it needs to be understood clearly and dealt with forthrightly, 'before it becomes even more destructive. I'm not sure just what the follow-up to the gathering in the Bundestag will be, but I left Berlin with two major impressions. One, growing numbers of people in Germany and other European countries more and more recognize anti-Semitism as a serious contemporary problem, and they're searching for ways to monitor it and effectively to restrain it. And two, these efforts can be significantly helped if the problems are acknowledged in all of their particularity and not obfuscated by generalized concepts writ large or run together with other social issues that, serious in themselves, are historically and existentially different from anti-Semitism. And in this connection, we assemble. Scholars like all of us gathered here today and over the next couple of days can certainly play a unique and clarifying and important role in fact, clarifying the challenges before us. They're not new, but they have taken on a new urgency in our day with the resurgence of a globalized anti-Semitism in recent years and the accelerating growth of hostility to Israel. Just how these two may be connected will be a major focus of our work in virtually all of our conferences sessions. I'm sure we can look forward to well-informed discussion of the problems and no doubt some rigorous debate about aspects of them. As we proceed, and we'll begin in just a minute, may I remind you that all speakers should hold their papers to 20 minutes, and may I remind the session chairs, Amy will be the first of them, that in the interest of making efficient use of our time, there is no need for them to offer biographical introductions. All of that material is here in your booklets. There may be a need for the chairs to enforce those 20 minutes. Amy will do it gently but also firmly, I'm sure. I want to make mention of the second person to whom this conference is dedicated. You'll all know of him, even if you may not have known him personally, and I refer to Daniel Pearl. I began my remarks in the Bundestag by quoting Daniel Pearl's opening words in a forced confession that was videotaped by the people who soon after he finished speaking murdered him. He said this: I am Jewish, my father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, I am Jewish. He then noted that his family comes from Israel, in particular from Bnei Brak, and he identified as an Israeli. And then he was decapitated. What I took away from that is that to be a Jew today, and especially a Jew associated with the state of Israel, either as an Israeli citizen or as someone recognized to be supportive of the state of Israel, can put one under a capital sentence. And Daniel Pearl's horrible fate marked that in a too dramatic a way. The rise of anti-Semitism does not begin with his decapitation, but it does reach a culminating point that we simply can't forget. I'm friends with Judea Pearl, his father. I invited Judea Pearl to address us at this conference, and he was not able to come. But he did write a letter, which I hope you had a chance to look at in this booklet. It's a remarkable letter, and one of the things that makes it so remarkable is that Judea Pearl and his wife, at the time of their son's murder, specifically downplayed any connection between that assassination and anti-Semitism. As he writes in this letter in your booklet, they regarded that, they feared it would be regarded as too parochial an association. And they then later came to realize that was a mistake. And I just want to read out to you, some of you may not have this in front of you, and I'll end with these words and then pass on to Amy. I quote the Pearls. "We felt that the intensity of the cosmic shock that emanated from Danny's murder and its significance as a warning call for the entire human race would somehow get attenuated or diverted if association with parochial issues such as anti-Semitism or anti-Israelism. More recently, however, we came to recognize that if we want to be true to our mission of rolling back the hatred that took Danny's life, we must first map its undercurrents, analyze its anatomy, and understand its circuity with scientific precisions." And the Pearls then turned to all of you at this conference, and they closed their letter with these words: "We are extremely grateful that you, distinguished scholars from across the globe, have come together to channel your talents and expertise towards this crucial endeavor. We have a great deal of hard, demanding, but important work ahead of us. It's not going to be easy to put in 12 hours a day, every day, as we have to do. But as the Pearls sign off their letter, may the spirit of Daniel strengthen your spirit. I'll close with those words.